welcome to this episode of the Cloud Gaming Report. I'm your host, Zach, and in this episode we have a ton of topics to discuss from different leaks, blog posts, as well as just general news about the world of cloud gaming. So definitely some exciting things there. And also E3 is right around the corner, so I'm expecting some very big topics to come out of E3. Microsoft is expected to have a big E3 presence, so we will possibly hear about xCloud, some more details about the service, maybe some details on when it might be able to publicly available for a public beta. I also expect that Google could discuss Stadia more because it has been a little while since their announcement. They're definitely going to want to keep it in the news topics, especially with E3 being such a big gaming event. It's very likely that they could release some more details about Stadia, possibly even when they might have another public beta, or maybe even just further launch details. AMD is also expected to have a big presence at E3 and reveal some of their gaming hardware, which very likely will be used in these different services. So E3 is definitely looking like it's going to have some very cool information. So guys, fasten your seatbelt because this episode and the next couple episodes should be jam-packed with a lot of cool information. But we're going to go ahead and dive into our first series of topics, which revolve around Project xCloud. Our first Project xCloud topic is a little bit older, but a couple weeks ago, Microsoft announced that Project xCloud had reached the take-home stage of internal testing. So what this means is that Microsoft employees will now be able to test Project xCloud from their house while they're on the road or even on the way to work. So this is definitely exciting news because it does show progress with the xCloud service, and it means that we're one step closer to the public beta that we'll hopefully be able to get our hands on in the very near future. With that being said, though, this will give Microsoft a lot of good data because people will be playing on different networks, because not every developer or Microsoft employee in general is going to have the same ISP at their home. And if they're playing on a mobile device using 4G, they should be able to get some good information there and hopefully be able to kind of tweak the service to have the best experience regardless of the device or the network that you're playing on, and be able to adapt to different networks, whether that be a in-home 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi connection, a wired connection, or a 4G connection, or even down the road a 5G connection. So definitely very good news there. It should give Microsoft some very good analytical data and be able to hopefully proceed to the public beta in the near future. Moving on from there, we have a blog post on the Xbox blog in last week, and this was talking about how the Project xCloud could technically launch with upwards of 3,500 games. And what they're saying here is that if a game has been made backwards compatible on Xbox One, then there's no issues with it running on Project xCloud. It is 100% compatible. So if if an original Xbox game or an Xbox 360 game has been made backwards compatible and it is playable on the Xbox One, then it is playable on Project xCloud, and that is definitely very exciting news. They do go on to say, though, that the new software development kit has some updates that allow developers to detect whether a game is being streamed at the time. So developers may choose to actually push a xCloud related update to their game to not make it more compatible, but make it a better overall experience, because the game might technically play on your phone, but it might not be a great experience with like the default virtual joystick, because simply due to the way the UI is designed, maybe the text isn't readable or something along those lines. So being able to rescale the UI so that it is enjoyable regardless of the size of the device or the type of device, whether you're playing with a standard gamepad or if you're trying to use a touch screen and use touch controls. So definitely exciting news there. Does mean that Xbox One and xCloud are definitely going to be more tightly integrated than we might have originally assumed. Definitely cool news there. And when they're going over some of the features of their SDK, their software development kit, they had a very interesting line that maybe I'm just reading too much into. Sometimes you have to do that with Microsoft anyways. They kind of have some reading between the lines to kind of interpret everything they're saying. But they have a line about one of their features that begin, quote, hosting multiplayer matches on a single server to reduce latency, end quote. Now, if you think about that, if you have two groups of players, you have one group of players playing on this match and another group of players playing in another match, it doesn't matter if they're on the same server. That's not going to impact the latency that those players are experiencing whatsoever. What I think Microsoft is possibly getting at is they could use tools so developers could make sure that if they're hosting a game and the game is being played in this data center, then they could use those tools possibly to detect that and put those players in a multiplayer match that is also hosted in that same data center. And if that's what they're saying, that could be massive for Microsoft simply because they are a big provider in the realm of just data centers in general. So a lot of developers might use their servers for hosting their gameplay, their multiplayer match servers. So if you think about that, say you might experience a 80 millisecond ping between you and the multiplayer server. If they could ensure that the player was actually connecting on I'm probably making this more complicated than I'm trying to say, but essentially if you're in the same data center or even in the same server rack, your latency could be dropped essentially down to zero or very, very near zero to the multiplayer server. So the xCloud host and the multiplayer server have essentially a zero latency. And if you would normally have an 80 millisecond latency to that multiplayer match, that is essentially eliminated down to zero. Now, of course, you're still going to have the latency between your house and the xCloud host, but that should be the same latency that you would experience with the multiplayer match. So essentially, you might have an experience very similar to what someone that's playing on their Xbox and having to connect to the multiplayer server versus you that has to connect to the multiplayer, or first have to connect to the xCloud host and then to the multiplayer server. By having that latency between the host, the xCloud host, and the multiplayer server essentially reduced down to zero, you should be able to have a very similar experience whether you're playing on a physical Xbox in your house or if you're using Project xCloud. And that could be very exciting, and maybe Microsoft might further elaborate on that, and maybe I have simply just read into that deeper than they intended. But the statement as they wrote it doesn't make a lot of sense unless you do kind of read further into it and kind of infer that that is kind of what they're getting at. And that could be very exciting for Microsoft simply because they do not only have the gaming division of Microsoft, but they do have the big data center division of Microsoft too, which will allow them to have kind of this huge benefit that not a lot of other providers out there, with the exception of someone like Google, would be able to actually do. Because if you think about it this way, if you connect to your Shadow isn't big enough to have developers host multiplayer servers on each one of their data centers. Microsoft is. So on Shadow, you have to have the latency between connecting between your house to the Shadow, and then the added latency of connecting from Shadow to wherever the game is hosted. With Microsoft, if the game is hosted and your Project xCloud host is actually the same thing, then you only have that one step of latency, which is normal for gaming in general, because if you are playing on a multiplayer server, unless you're playing a LAN game, then you have that latency anyway. So this could go a long way to solving one of the biggest issues with cloud gaming, if everything pans out kind of as I infer from their statement. It was just a brief statement, and it's very possible that I read too much into it. But Microsoft does have that capability simply because they do have the data center side of things as well as the gaming side of things. So that could be very interesting for kind of what I might consider the next generation or cloud gaming 1.5. So let's go ahead and move on to our next topic, which is about a partnership between Sony and Microsoft. In a rather puzzling announcement, Microsoft has announced that they have partnered together with Sony on cloud gaming and AI. No further news has really surfaced in the last couple weeks since this announcement was originally made, and it is a rather short announcement, so there isn't really a ton to talk about, but it is rather a interesting and definitely kind of a puzzling announcement on the surface, because PlayStation has their cloud gaming service that they've been operating for the last several years called PlayStation Now. Microsoft is heavy in development with Project xCloud, which I just recently talked about, and it doesn't seem that they would want to cooperate on two heavily competing services. But Microsoft is a titan in the tech industry, and they have their data centers, which are completely separate from their Xbox division. So it's very possible that Sony is working with the Azure side of Microsoft, and PlayStation Now and xCloud really aren't working together, if that makes any sense at all, because they are completely separate divisions within Microsoft. So they could very well be working with one division of Microsoft and completely ignoring and still competing with another division of Microsoft. And if this is true, it is a win-win for Microsoft, because if their xCloud is successful, they have win and profits there. And if Sony's PlayStation Now is successful, then they have win and they have profits from their data center side of things there too. So it is definitely smart on Microsoft's side. And on the AI side of things, they're talking about blending Sony's image sensors, which are some of the best on the market, with Microsoft's cloud. So this could be using the cloud to do some image processing automatically whenever Sony's image sensors are actually utilized. Not a lot has been talked about there either, but definitely some interesting news, and hopefully we'll find some additional details as more new surfaces possibly at E3, but Sony isn't really expected to have a big event at E3, so only time will tell there on what they kind of announced there. Moving on from there, we have an announcement from Shadow about their update to their iOS beta app. They have a new virtual gamepad design. It can be hidden, or it is hidden rather, when in portrait mode, and you can still access settings when the virtual gamepad is active. I don't have a iOS device. I use Android, Chrome OS, and Windows, so I wasn't actually able to test this out, but maybe I might steal my wife's phone for a couple hours and download Shadow and kind of play around with it and see how well it actually functions. But at least as far as that goes, that's all I have to really talk about Shadow in today's episode. Moving on from there, we have some very interesting news about LiquidSky and their new partner, Walmart. So as I just teased, in a surprising leak, it was discovered that LiquidSky and Walmart are very likely teaming up on the next generation of LiquidSky's cloud gaming services. This is definitely very exciting, but before I begin into this topic, I wanted to give Reddit user Durrod a huge shout out for finding all this information, digging into LiquidSky's website code, and doing a lot of the groundwork here. Just wanted to give him a huge shout out. Also, if you're on Reddit and you're listening to this podcast and you're not a member of the Cloudy Gamer subreddit, head over there and make sure you subscribe to that or join that subreddit, because it is a great subreddit. And if you're listening to this podcast, it's a natural fit for you. So with that being said, and once again, thanks to Durrod, we have some very interesting details on LiquidSky's future. So if you head over to their website, you can update. It's been updated, and you can see that there is a login screen that says you can log in with your email or password, which is very, very standard. But you also have the alternative to log in with Walmart. Normally, if you see a alternative login, you can log in with a service like Facebook or Google. But on LiquidSky, you can log in with Walmart. And that's the first tip that gave Durrod the hint that something was up, and he definitely started digging deeper into it, and he found some very interesting things. But I mainly want to talk about the overall kind of integration between Walmart and LiquidSky in today's episode, because I haven't had time to read through everything that he has dug up. I want to go through the website myself and kind of dig through the code to kind of somewhat verify everything he has found, but possibly see if I can dig anything up on top of that. So I will probably be talking about this in the next episode. But for now, it definitely is somewhat surprising, but not a complete surprise to me to see LiquidSky and Walmart team up. Because we do know that Walmart is wanting a cloud gaming service. They has expressed interest about a month or so ago. Time kind of flies, so when exactly I heard about all these different topics kind of mashed together, but we do know that Walmart is looking for a cloud gaming service, and if they had to start from the ground up, they would be so far behind services out there that are already existing, such as Shadow and GeForce Now, or services that are on the horizon, such as Stadia and xCloud, that it would put them at a huge disadvantage. So teaming up with LiquidSky is a perfect fit for Walmart. We also know that LiquidSky does have the attention of these bigger companies, because we know that in late 2018, I believe it was, that they had got the attention of Verizon and were running tests with Verizon on 5G networks for cloud gaming. So definitely, we do know that LiquidSky could have gotten the attention of a big company like Walmart, and it makes a perfect fit between the two, as LiquidSky is working on their next generation of cloud gaming services. And I definitely have to give LiquidSky props, because when they went from LiquidSky 1 to 2, they had that very messy transition, so completely shutting down their services, which does essentially lose them some of their publicity, word of mouth, and it does essentially stop the flow of income, at least from users. It is probably the best for them, especially if they're making a move as big as integrating with Walmart. And another Reddit user actually shared a screenshot of the iOS version of the website, which is much different from what we see on Windows and Android and Chrome OS. It actually shows a logo that says Walmart Gaming by LiquidSky. So it is definitely looking to the fact that they are definitely integrating together. And it looks like Walmart has picked up the LiquidSky tech and are working very heavily with LiquidSky. We don't know if Walmart bought LiquidSky or if they're just working together with LiquidSky at this point in time. That's still up in the air. But the fact that we see the Walmart Gaming by LiquidSky logo is definitely very, very strongly indicating that the two are at the very least working together in providing a new cloud gaming service that is provided by LiquidSky, but is going under the Walmart Gaming banner. So cool news there. Hopefully we'll get some more information possibly at E3. They might announce something. The website update has been in the more recent couple of weeks, so maybe they're kind of preparing all that for that big reveal at E3. Only time will tell. But definitely cool news. We are seeing some news from LiquidSky, so it doesn't look like they have completely just died and disappeared. They are working on stuff that it still appears, and the next generation of LiquidSky will be made, it looks like, at the very least at this point in time now. Now, our final news topic for this episode is the fact that GeForce Now is very likely preparing to add credits. This is another kind of somewhat leak that someone had discovered over on the GeForce Now forums. And they found that in one of the recent updates, there are some new error message. And one of those error messages is the fact that, quote, and begin quote, you've been disconnected because you've ran out of credits, end quote. So this is likely something that Nvidia is getting ready to implement before they actually launch their service out of the beta, which is entirely free at this point in time, and start actually offering the service as a paid service. And it's possible that they might do that through credits. But a lot of services are kind of leaning to a subscription now, and maybe they might do a blend where if you don't want to pay a more expensive subscription fee, you can buy credits, especially if you're a more casual gamer that might only have time to game 1 to 2 nights a month. The credit system makes a lot more sense. So having both options available, it's kind of the best of both worlds. I know a lot of people definitely hate the credit system, but if you could offer both systems, it would definitely be a win for everybody out there, I think. But at this point in time, we don't have a lot of details. It could have been something that they're essentially testing because it hasn't actually came out any further. They haven't actually started giving like even the free users so many credits on a monthly basis to start testing that further. So it could just be something that they tested internally, and it might never even see the light of day, but it does look like they're at least internally testing a credit-based system for GeForce Now. So that's our final topic for this episode. There was a lot to talk about. This was probably going to be one of the longer episodes of the Cloud Gaming Report, but that's not necessarily a bad thing because it means a lot is going on in the world of cloud gaming. And hopefully the next episode is just as packed, or if not more packed, after we have E3 and have some juicy details, I'm hoping, about the different cloud gaming services that are out there on the market and will be arriving on the market in the near future. So thanks for watching or listening to this episode, guys. I hope you found some very interesting, juicy news that you hadn't already heard. If you did, give it a big like, a heart, whatever the action is on the platform that you're listening, whether that be YouTube or your podcast player of choice. And also, if you're not already subscribed, make sure to smash that subscribe button or like button or whatever it is on your podcast app or YouTube. So guys, thanks for watching or listening once again. And until next time, Zach out.